A black man is pulled over in a quiet suburb. What should have been a routine stop turns into a tense, racially charged standoff when the cop pulls his gun. But everything changes the moment the man quietly reveals who he really is, a high-ranking CIA operative. This emotionally powerful story explores racial bias, the danger of assumptions, and the hidden strength behind silent dignity. It was 8:42 p.m., the sun just disappearing behind the horizon, casting an amber glow on the streets of Westbrook. A predominantly white, affluent suburb just outside of D.C. streets were clean, houses immaculate, and suspicion thick like pollen in the air for anyone who looked out of place. Darius Miles, 37, wasn't speeding. His black Audi A7 cruised at a modest 34 in a 35 miles per hour zone. Music low. Windows cracked slightly. He was coming from visiting his mother in the city, a bi-weekly ritual that grounded him in the roots of who he was. Darius didn't dress flashy. Simple black turtleneck press slacks and a navy trench coat. But his skin, to some in Westbrook, was crime enough. The red and blue lights flared behind him like the warning signs of a coming storm. Darius looked in his rearview mirror and exhaled, deeply. Not again, he thought. He signaled, turned into a quiet cul-de-sac, and parked. The moment he rolled down his window, he saw in the officer's eyes agitation mixed with authority. A man trained to see a threat where none existed. License and registration. Officer Brent Cullen barked, hand already resting on the butt of his gun. Of course, Darius replied calmly, reaching deliberately for his wallet. That's when the tone shifted. Hands on the wheel, the officer shouted. Now! Darius froze, then slowly complied. My license is in my wallet. I'm reaching for it. Step out of the car. Now! There was no de-escalation, no explanation, just a shriek of fear masquerading as command. Darius exited with his hands up. The officer's gun came out, aimed directly at his chest. Brent Cullen wasn't new to the force, but his record wasn't clean either. 5 excessive force complaints in 2 years. 1 demotion. Still, the union protected him, and so did the color of his skin. He saw Darius not as a man, but as a threat in human form. Turn around. Hands on the hood. Darius complied without resistance, his voice even. You haven't told me what I've done. You match the description, Cullen spat. Car theft in the area. Step wider. Car theft? This is my car. Registered to my name. Cullen didn't want to hear it. Shut up. Speak when spoken to. And then he patted him down with one hand, keeping the other tightly gripped on his Glock. Fear disguised as confidence. But Cullen didn't know what Darius carried, not in his pocket, but in his mind. He didn't know that Darius Miles had spent 12 years deep cover, infiltrating cartels from Bogota to Bangkok. He didn't know this suspect once brokered peace between 2 militant factions in northern Africa. He didn't know that this man could dismantle his whole career with one phone call. But Darius didn't want war. Not here. Not now. Not again. I need to reach into my coat, Darius said softly. Inside pocket. Left side. Don't move. Cullen snapped, stepping back, finger grazing the trigger. My identification. Not just license. The other one. What other one? Darius turned slowly, eyes steady. I'm a federal officer. I work in intelligence. I'm part of the CIA. Bull asterisk, 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 asterisk. Darius slowly opened his coat with 2 fingers and pulled out the small, shielded wallet. Inside, a federal ID with his real name, a gold embossed seal, and clearance code. Cullen stepped closer, snatched the ID with trembling fingers. His eyes flicked over it. Name, Miles Darius E. Agency. Central Intelligence Agency. Counterintelligence Division status. Active. Cullen's face dropped. This real? He asked, voice cracking. Darius's eyes narrowed. Call it in. Use the encrypted line. They'll verify. Cullen staggered back, as if the way of his mistake had just hit him like a freight train. The gun lowered, hand shaking. I didn't know, he muttered. You never do, Darius said, his voice cool but burning. Backup arrived. A younger officer, wide-eyed and nervous, took Cullen aside. Darius stood still, composed, dignified. But inside, a storm brewed. The sergeant on duty apologized profusely. They offered to escort him home, make it right. But Darius wasn't looking for pity or protocol. He was looking for change. He filed an official complaint, not for vengeance, but for documentation. The incident made the rounds within the agency. Quiet whispers moved up the chain. Within 3 weeks, Cullen was on leave. A month later, he was gone, forced to resign. Darius was invited to speak at a federal law enforcement summit. He declined the stage. Instead, he gave a closed-door briefing to senior leadership. His message was simple. If I wasn't who I am, if I didn't have this badge, would I be alive today? What happened to Darius happens to countless others who don't carry federal credentials. Men and women whose only crime is the color of their skin, the streets they walk, the cars they drive, the skin they wear. Darius survived not because justice worked, but because power recognized power. But what about the ones without that shield? What about the ones who never get the chance to speak? This story is a reminder that racism isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it pulls a trigger. And sometimes it meets a man it can't classify, can't arrest, can't break. Sometimes it meets a mirror. 3 months had passed since the night Officer Cullen had drawn his weapon on Darius Miles. To the public, it was just another routine police misconduct case buried beneath bureaucracy and backlogs. But within certain circles, quiet government corridors and closed-door meetings, it was anything but forgotten. Darius wasn't a man who enjoyed the spotlight. His work demanded secrecy. His past demanded silence. But the incident had stirred something in him, a fire too old and too familiar to ignore. One morning, he received a call from an unknown number. "This is Director Chun," said the voice on the other end. "We'd like to ask a favor." Darius already knew where this was going. "There's a public symposium next month," Chun continued. "Law enforcement, intelligence, Justice Department. We want to put someone on that stage who knows both worlds. Someone who's lived the double edge of being protector and a target." Darius was silent for a long time. "You're asking me to be your mascot," he finally said. "No," Chun replied. "We're asking you to be the truth." The stage was grand. Polished oak. Flags from every federal agency behind the podium. The room was filled with brass. FBI directors, Homeland Security officials, police chiefs, attorneys general. And yet, as Darius took the microphone, he saw only one face in the crowd, Officer Brent Cullen. He hadn't been invited, but he had come anyway. Word had spread about the speaker. Cullen had to see it with his own eyes. Darius began simply. 3 months ago, I was pulled over in a quiet neighborhood. His voice was calm, but the weight in the room grew heavier with each sentence. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't driving recklessly. But I was in a car that seemed too nice, wearing clothes that seemed too sharp, in a body that seemed too black. Eyes locked on him, not blinking, not breathing. I complied. I didn't resist. I explained. I warned. And still a gun was drawn, not because I posed a threat, but because I matched the fear. He paused. I survived that night because I had a badge in my coat pocket. But I want to ask you, how many men and women don't? How many people have been cuffed, beaten, or buried because they couldn't prove they were worthy of decency? There was a rustle in the room, but no one interrupted. You all sit here in suits, talking about reform and policy. But I'm telling you now, you cannot train away hate. You cannot de-escalate bias. You can only confront it with accountability, with courage, and with change. He looked directly at Cullen, who now seemed impossibly small in the crowd, and to the man who pointed a gun at my chest and called me a suspect. I hope you listen. Not because I want an apology, but because the next man you pull over might not be me, and the next trigger you squeeze might not spare a life. After the speech, a dozen people lined up to shake his hand. Some meant it. Others just wanted to be seen doing the right thing. But Director Chen met him with quiet eyes. "You said more in 10 minutes than our task force did in 6 months. Darius sighed. Let's hope someone was listening. Later that day, he was approached by Cullen himself. No cameras, no witnesses. Agent Miles, he said, voice lower than Darius remembered. I've resigned. Darius nodded slowly. I wasn't raised like that, Cullen added. I didn't know why I reacted the way I did. You don't have to understand your fear, Darius replied, his voice still and sharp. You just have to make sure it doesn't kill someone. Cullen lowered his eyes. I'm trying to be better. I hope you do, Darius said, because someone else might not get the chance to survive your learning curve. That night, Darius sat alone in his apartment. The city lights glittered below. He thought about his father, once a Vietnam vet turned civil rights lawyer, who taught him that justice was a long game, sometimes generational. He'd made peace with never being fully accepted, but he couldn't accept being silent. He pulled out a worn photograph. His father, in a tattered military uniform, standing outside a courthouse with a hand-painted sign. Dignity is not optional. Justice is not negotiable. Darius smiled, then whispered into the stillness of his apartment. I spoke, Dad. I made them listen. The story didn't end at the traffic stop. That was only the spark. The real story was what happened after, the reckoning, the reflection, the responsibility. Darius didn't change the world in one speech, but he cracked the door open. And sometimes the smallest opening is all it takes for light to come in.